Hello again. There's a webinar that I created a few months ago, and it was called Warning, Your Lack of Sleep May Lead to Alzheimer's Disease. And in this blog, I wanted to briefly cover the points of that webinar, and then at the end give you a way to get to a link to review the whole 20-minute webinar if you'd like. So the idea is that Arianna Huffington, who's been very generous in allowing me to share my information with her over time in Huffington Post, has of course really pioneered the area of sleep and what happens when you don't get enough of it. And for those of you that are familiar with Arianna, who's just a delightful lady and just, again, being so supportive of what we're doing, she had an experience as a very high-driven, successful executive at Huffington Post of being so exhausted that one day she actually keeled over at the desk, hit her face on the desk and broke her nose. And that was a clue to her that maybe something was out of balance. And from a woman's perspective, saying, besides being successful in the marketplace and a very successful corporate executive and balancing all the needs at home, there was something out of balance in terms of self-care. So that got her to really think about the modality of sleep and how important that is. So I wanted to relate that to craniosacral therapy because in all our experience that we've been discussing about how craniosacral therapy can help drain toxins from the brain, there is some overlap in terms of sleep and craniosacral therapy about how craniosacral therapy can help augment this process. So very, very simply, when we went through the webinar and talked about sleep, I also related this to the lymphatic system, which again, as we've been discussing, there's about 100 billion neurons and about 100 billion glial cells or astrocytes in the brain. And this most recent scientific research, which is only about 10 years old, the discovery of the lymphatic system, the lymphatic part of the glymph. Also what researchers found, which is very exciting, is that they found really there's kind of a separate drainage area in the brain, just like there's a lymphatic system in the body, which has not always been totally well understood, but it clears and carts away toxins from the body. So it's been found through evidence in microimaging, which is why this is such a relatively new discovery, because it took some more refined imaging techniques to even really verify that this system really existed in the brain. It's a little aside. But what they found is that this system helps clear toxins out of the brain, this lymphatic system, much more effectively than anyone previously thought. And also the mechanism of clearance was also a little bit more subtle than people thought. So in terms of general craniosacral therapy, we've known for years there's a membrane system that underlies the bone of the head. It's called the membrane system. And it circulates cerebrospinal fluid, like around the periphery and down the spinal column, the periphery. But the discovery of this lymphatic system said that, wait, there's even more. There's an exchange of fluid, of cerebrospinal fluid, that interfaces with this membrane. And just like millions and billions of tendrils that go deep into the root and core of the brain, a little bit like spider webs or tendrils that go from the surface of the brain all the way to the depths, that conducts a derivative of cerebrospinal fluid called extracellular fluid into basically every aspect of the brain. And in addition, when I have mentioned before how there's about 400 miles of vascular supply in the brain, there's a very intimate relationship between vascular supply and cerebrospinal fluid, and how this fluid is actually carted away or dumped out of the system. So given that backdrop, it also is one of the observations that this lymphatic system does about 60% of its work during sleep. You can think of this lymphatic system as like going into shutdown. It's revving up during activity, but when this lymphatic system shuts down, that's when it starts to drain all the toxins from the brain. Now, the problem is if sleep is interrupted, that system can't work as effectively, if that makes sense. So the problem is that about 80 million Americans have some problem with sleep, from a small amount to a large amount. All you need to do is turn on CNN or any news program and look at their advertisements for Ambien, and you can see, sleep aids, that people are having problems getting sleep, which makes sense because if our reticular activating system contained in the back of our head, if our system is revved up because of worry or feeling like something's going to happen, that unexpected crisis that may occur, the system remains revved up. It can't settle down. It's highly what's called sympathetic. And the way I explained sympathetic tone, I said it's like that guy in the white pickup truck in Chicago tailgating you at 80 miles an hour, or really anywhere. It's like the system doesn't get a chance to ramp down and relax. And parasympathetic tone is the tone that allows us to rest and relax and repair. So the idea is that if we're on edge and stressed, the body can't settle down. It can't get enough sleep, and therefore the toxins can't be released as effectively. So that's why I kind of joke. I said your lack of sleep may be leading to Alzheimer's disease, means that, again, not just for 1 or 2 days, but over days, months, years, and decades, if that lack of sleep is a prevalent pattern in our lifestyle, it means that there's a greater opportunity that because we're not getting as good a sleep, those toxins are going to start to collect in the brain. So that's going to reinforce all those other mechanisms we've been discussing in prior blogs about inflammation, trauma, toxicity, heavy metals, so on and so forth. And the brain, given its druthers, would actually like to repair and rest if it could be allowed to do so. So that's where craniosacral therapy comes in. Because what we find in general, whether we're treating craniosacral therapy for Alzheimer's, dementia, or not, is that it lowers sympathetic tone. It takes the stress out of the system, which can impact a lot of autoimmune diseases and other disease vectors as well, and especially in terms of memory problems. People just feel more relaxed. And it's not uncommon on the table, especially guys that get on the table, they'll just snore and go away, they're gone. They'll wake up and they say, well, we don't know what happened, but we feel a lot more relaxed. That's because the system and the metabolism of the body during craniosacral therapy is beginning to settle down. And when it does so, the body just drops to a whole nother level of rest. When that happens, toxins can clear from the brain, which is part of our theory as to why craniosacral therapy is so effective in the treatment of memory problems. But in addition, because there's that effect even after treatment, it's not uncommon for people to go home and get a really good night's sleep because their system is allowed to lower to the level where it can get a more recuperative sleep and repair. So if you add craniosacral therapy to other things that you're doing, it's probably going to mean just as a benefit, you're going to get a better night's sleep. So we talk about that in the webinar, and then I give some practical examples just to how to get sleep better, which Arianna Huffington mentions as well. One thing is, if you're always worried, you can write down all the things you need to do for the next day and then just forget about it. Ray Kroc, who started McDonald's, of all people, at 50 years old, he had this ability. He said before he went to sleep, he would image his mind with a blackboard, because in the old days, in the 50s, that's what they had. They had blackboards, and with chalk, he would write down all the things he would need to do for the day. Then he imaged erasing that, and then he went to sleep and got a great night's sleep, which is quite a trick to do, especially with someone that was growing a national franchise like that. But that was his trick. So writing things down, then forgetting it, putting it aside to the next day, that's one particular trick. Another thing you can do is set up your sleeping environment. So without electrical appliances or electronic appliances, that's not going to disturb your sleep. Another suggestion that people have is something like, if you're into this with aromatherapy, using lavender or some substance like that in a burner or aromatherapy device, if you know what that is, to create a little healthier atmosphere for breathing and so on and so forth. Then the other thing you can do is get one of these still point inducers we've been talking about, putting that behind your head, resting on that before you go to sleep, taking it out as you remember, and you'll probably slip right into a very nice deep sleep. So those are just some tips in terms of supporting your sleep process and how craniosacral therapy, hand in glove with other things, can support this process. If you're really, really interested in seeing the full webinar, your lack of sleep can lead to Alzheimer's, and all the tips and all the science behind it, some of the other tapes that we play, email me at info@preventingalzheimers.com and put sleep webinar on that, and we'll find a way to link that so you can get a replay to the full webinar. So thanks for letting me share these tips with you about sleep. Have a great night's sleep tonight, and we'll see you again soon. Thank you.